The Lake Champlain portion of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail is a fascinating and beautiful trip. 115 miles long, 425 square miles, it is the 6th largest freshwater lake in the U.S. Before you head out on the roughly 25-mile trip, it's highly recommended to first obtain the excellent maps and guidebook produced by the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. This video is meant only as a supplement to these publications, offering additional factual information and visual cues for important places along the way. The more one knows about the lake before heading out, the greater the chance to develop an appreciation for the waterway and surrounding communities. As with any big water paddling, you should be aware of several safety factors before you head out. Wind is a big factor and can create 30-inch waves. Plan for this. Weather can change dramatically and quickly, so keep an eye on the skies for darkening clouds. Boat traffic can be heavy at times. Don't always assume motorboats can see you. Just be aware. Lake water can be very cold before June. Were you to capsize in large open water, you can be in a life-threatening situation. Unless you are a very experienced paddler, it might be wise to stay close to the shore. There are 2 points along the trail in this video that are at least a mile paddle. You may choose alternative takeouts or accommodations rather than attempt these long stretches of open water. Finally, even on cloudy days, you can become sunburned without adequate protection. It is recommended to bring a hat and sunscreen, plus sunglasses to protect your eyes from glare. Always bring a PFD or personal flotation device, and it's a good idea to wear it at all times. It's also a good idea to paddle in groups of more than one person. Touring kayaks are suggested. The Northern Forest Canoe Trail is a Vermont treasure and deserves respect. Take it upon yourself to act as a good steward of the lake and surrounding lands. Much of the lakeshore is private property. Limit your access to temporary stops or emergencies and treat the land as you would your own. Don't trample sensitive plants and don't damage or in any way alter historical or cultural artifacts. Lastly, don't leave behind garbage and make sure to fasten your personal items so that they don't fall off or blow away. This video will follow a northerly route beginning at Gordon's Ferry and ending at the Route 78 bridge. It can be done in reverse direction just as easily. Be aware that wind direction in the summer most often comes out of the southwest. It will be at your back along this route. This video follows a route beginning in Grand Isle, Vermont. If you were to begin in Plattsburgh and cross the open water, plan to time your crossing of these lanes carefully. If you can hold off on starting until after 8 a.m., you might want to squeeze a self-guided tour of the Ed Weed Fish Hatchery across the street from the ferry. Created in 1991, it raises 6 different species of fish for stocking into Lake Champlain: brown trout, rainbow trout, steelhead trout, lake trout, landlocked Atlantic salmon, and walleye. Visitors can feed fish and learn about them in the center's aquarium. Nearby, the Gordon House Center is the office for the Lake Champlain Basin Program and offers great information about efforts that benefit the basin's water quality, fisheries, wetlands, wildlife, recreation, and cultural resources. Before we begin, a geological and historical primer on the lake is in order. The Earth has had many ice ages, but the one that has had the biggest effect on the Lake Champlain Valley was the Pleistocene, which began about 2.5 million years ago, covering the lake in ice a mile thick. 20,000 years ago, retreating glaciers started melting northward. About 15,000 years ago, Lake Vermont formed in the depression left by these retreating glaciers, locked by the ice in the north and dams of rock, mud, and ice to the south. For centuries, the tremendous weight of the ice depressed the land below sea level. In addition, ocean levels rose with melting ice. The combination meant that when the glaciers receded far enough north, seawater rushed in and filled the basin to form what is known as the Champlain Sea. Marine life such as beluga whales existed in these very waters. Finally, 11,000 years ago, free from the weight of the glaciers, land rebounded until the lake was higher than sea level and water began to slowly flow northward. The remaining brackish water was eventually replaced with fresh, and the lake you see today has existed in a similar state for at least 9,000 years. Native Americans have used the Lake Champlain Valley waters for over 10,000 years. The islands acted as border zones between two enemy tribes, the Abenaki and Iroquois. Samuel de Champlain sailed up the lake in 1609, the first non-native to explore the area. He claimed the Champlain Valley for France, naming it New France. Almost 60 years later, in 1666, Captain Pierre Lamont established Fort St. Anne, Vermont's oldest white settlement, as a defense against the Mohawk tribe. It was his behavior towards the Iroquois in the southern part of the lake that set the tone for French-Iroquois relations for the next 100 years and ultimately doomed France's colonial efforts in the region. The lake was the primary commercial route between Montreal and New York City, and because of its strategic importance, saw conflicts during the Revolutionary War as well as the War of 1812. Just south near Valcour Island, the Battle of Lake Champlain was fought in 1776. Later, in 1812, just across the water at Cumberland Bay, the Battle of Plattsburgh was fought. In September of 1814, the British fleet rounded Cumberland Head, and a dying wind left them vulnerable to anchored American ships. Within 3 hours, they were defeated, and the land troops withdrew to Canada. This led to the signing of the Treaty of Ghent and the end of the War of 1812 on Christmas Eve. As you begin the west shore of Grand Isle, notice the scars which the winter ice leaves on the shoreline. Keep an eye out for northern white and red cedar trees and shagbark hickory on the rocky ledges above you. You'll soon see Van Teen's boat launch on the right and an alternative great put-in or takeout if you were to do this trip going south. Soon, keep an eye out for two small islands on the left, Young to the south and Bixby Islands to the north. Young Island in particular had been taken over by ring-billed gulls and cormorants who had denuded the island's vegetation and chased out other birds. Over the last 15 years, biologists from Vermont Fish and Wildlife had been working to rescue the island by applying cooking oil to eggs to prevent hatching. These efforts have reduced numbers to less than 1/10 the 15,000 or so birds that used to be there. As a result, black ducks and the state-endangered common terns have returned. Common terns are extremely sensitive to disturbance during the breeding season in May. Please don't approach the island if you paddle at that time. As you paddle eastward through Tromp Point on your right and Bow Arrow Point on the island of North Hero on your left, you will be entering a shallow bay called the Gut. The narrow spits of land were once the site of the Rutland Canadian Railroad, completed in 1890 and operated until 1964. Stepping back in time for a moment, the first major mode of commerce was boats. Paddles and oars, which first led the way, transitioned to sail and wind up and down the 120 miles of deep water. In 1807, steam power came to the Hudson, and a year later, to Lake Champlain. These steadily replaced the sloops and schooners. At first, Burlington, Plattsburgh, and St. Albans were the markets for the produce of the islands. 1823 saw the completion of the Champlain Canal and the locks on the Richelieu River. This made Montreal and New York open to barges of apples, potatoes, wool, butter, and livestock. 2 years later, in 1825, the Erie Canal opened, resulting in an armada of boats designed for canal, lake, and river travel. Grand Isle County has one of the lowest rainfalls east of the Mississippi and the longest growing season in Vermont. As a result, agriculture has flourished on the islands. Beginning in the late 1800s, large-scale orchards were established along the lake. By mid-20th century, apples were the primary crop. These fruit products, along with the state's renowned maple industry, enhanced Vermont's agricultural reputation throughout the U.S. and as far away as England. Increasingly, the railroads made it easier to transport cheaper products from the land-rich West, and the island economy transitioned to tourism. Across the bay, you'll see the Grand Island Drawbridge, built in 1953. Originally site to a ferry service begun in 1795, it later saw construction of a swing bridge in 1892. On your left is Knight Point State Park, which offers emergency camping only, requiring informing park authorities. The cobbled shoreline west of the swimming beach and extending around Camp Meeting Point is a state natural area. It's the largest undisturbed example of this type of natural community on Lake Champlain and is home to an unusually diverse group of rare plant species. Passing under the bridge, keep an eye out for boat traffic, often heavy through this point. As you head north, you'll be paddling the shoreline of North Hero Island. The largest open water you see before you is known as the Inland Sea. Note that if the wind is coming from the northeast, you may be wet with huge waves and may have to avoid the east side of North Hero altogether. Paddling north, you will pass Hen Island. Keep an eye out for a variety of waterfowl, as well as larger raptors. As you paddle, note that you are approaching the approximate halfway point of the trip. Choices for overnight accommodations include Shore Acres Inn before you reach North Hero and Knight Island State Park, a mile paddle across from the village. Another option is North Hero House. The village marks a great place to take out for an extended break. Heroes Welcome is an institution on the island and a great place to grab something to eat. If you don't have your own boats, Heroes Welcome has a kayak rental shop and offers single and tandem kayaks. Nearby is the Chamber of Commerce and an excellent Northern Forest Canoe Trail kiosk offering information about the route and the lake's history. Just a short paddle north of the village, you'll come to what is known as the Carrying Place, a portage point for Native Americans and early settlers. If the winds have picked up and you feel paddling the west side of the island might be better, you can cross here through Carey Bay and up the Alberg Passage. If the water is high enough, you can paddle through the culvert. If not, you'll have to carry your boat over Route 2. Be careful as traffic can move fast through this stretch. A fantastic side trip while paddling the west side of North Hero is Alberg Dunes State Park, the longest undeveloped sand beach on the Vermont side of Lake Champlain. It has two species of rare plants, Champlain beach grass and the low-growing beach pea, both holdovers from the post-glacial era in which Lake Champlain was an inland estuary of the Atlantic Ocean. Near the Alberg Route 2 bridge, you can also find accommodations at the Parker Lodge and West Shore Cabins, as well as food and supplies at the nearby Harborside Harvest Market. If you end up paddling the east side of North Hero, there are two boat access points, one at Kings Bay and one further at the northern tip of the island at Stevenson Point in North Hero State Park. This park is day use only. Stevenson Point is the last place to take out prior to crossing the mile-long stretch to Clark and Hog Island points across the way. As you make your way to Stevenson Point, keep an eye out for state-threatened spiny soft-shell turtles along its shores, as well as the shoreline up to the Route 78 bridge. These turtles are reliant on sand or gravel beaches to lay their eggs, and their population has been impacted by development. No populations have ever been documented on the northern side of the lake, but there are viable populations at Stevenson Point, Mokwam Bay, Ransoms Bay in Alberg, and Hog Island. Spiny soft-shell turtles live to be 50 years old and up to 21 inches long. Mating takes place in April to May. Females will dig nests for up to 20 eggs laid in June. Hatchlings emerge between late August and October. Stay at least 300 feet away, honoring signs when posted. Be on the lookout for boat traffic and wind during the mile-long paddle leading to Hog Island. You may choose to take out at the Tabor Point boat launch. If you continue on, you'll reach the 100-year-old East Alberg swing span. This 3,800-foot-long wood railroad trestle is a movable swing span bridge. In 1901, the Rutland Railroad completed construction of the railroad through the islands between Burlington, Vermont and Rouse's Point, New York. At that time, the purpose of this construction was to give the Rutland access to Canada, separate from the tracks of the competing Central Vermont Railroad. The Rutland's primary freight traffic consisted of dairy products. Just a short paddle north leads beneath the Route 78 bridge. Your trip ends at the Larry Green access area on Sandy Point Road, next to the Route 78 bridge. Be sure you wash off your boats before paddling in other water bodies to avoid the spread of invasive species. Eurasian milfoil is especially predominant throughout the lake and near the access. Follow the clean, drain, dry protocols put forth by the Lake Champlain Basin Program. Be sure to check out our other videos on Vermont's waterways along the Northern Forest Canoe Trail and plan your next adventure.